Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. Every month, members get 1 credit to pick any title, plus 2 Audible originals from a monthly selection, and access to daily news digests from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Washington Post, as well as guided meditation programs. Between a full-time job in IT and a full-time job in podcasting, it gets harder and harder to sit down and read the books I'm interested in. This is where Audible comes in. I can listen on my daily commute, relaxing, or while out running errands and still get in the books I've been wanting to get into. You can download titles and listen offline anytime, anywhere. The app is free and can be installed on all smartphones and tablets. Now you can try Audible risk-free with a special 30-day free trial by visiting audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's audibletrial.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Don't let your busy life get in the way of that great book you've been wanting to read. Go get your free trial of Audible today. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. This is Geoffrey, and we've talked about many times before that I experience problems and struggles with my mental health, and really without a healthy mind, being truly happy and at peace is hard. The good news is therapy does work. It's helped for me, but what is therapy exactly? It's whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're not feeling motivated right now and would like some tools to help. Or maybe you're feeling insecure in relationships at work, or you're not dealing well with stress. Whatever you need, it's really time to stop being ashamed of normal human struggles, and it's time to start feeling better because you deserve to be happy. And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is a customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours. So join the millions of people who are seeing what online therapy is really about. It's always a good time to invest in yourself because you are your greatest asset. And there's a special offer to Nerdery and Murdery listeners. You can get 10% off your first month of professional therapy at betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. That's betterhelp.com/Nerdery and Murdery. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast.
I am so glad we got this dude here. I've been wanting to talk about Kaiju, but I know nothing about it. So I got 2 minutes of stuff, and then I want to spin him up like a top.
Well, I'm going to be right there with you. Welcome to episode 130 of Nerdery and Murdery.
Big 130. I'm Zig with your Nerdery.
And I'm Geoffrey with your Murdery. And once again, we brought back Donald. So he's going to be with us for this week again. Really appreciative of him being here. I don't have much of note. And I know Don can go off for a while. So Zig, I will let you take over on the Nerdery side of the house while I go off camera for a bit.
Sweet. Okie dokie. All right. So with Kaiju, I just want to go over some terms and stuff that I've looked up, basically dictionary stuff. So I'll go through that, and then I want you to go. All right. So Kaiju means strange beast, is a Japanese term that is commonly associated with media involving giant monsters and monster movies, a subgenre of science fiction and fantasy. It was created by E.G. Tsuburaya and Ishiro Honda. The word can also refer to the giant monsters themselves, which are usually depicted attacking major cities and battling either the military or other monsters. Director Ishiro Honda and Tokusatsu directed E.G. Tsuburaya's 1954 film Gojira, and is often regarded as the first kaiju film. Kaiju characters are often somewhat metaphorical in nature. Gojira, for example, serves as a metaphor for nuclear weapons, reflecting the fears of post-war Japan following the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki And the Lucky Dragon 5 incident. Another notable example of kaiju characters include King Kong, Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, and Gamera. The Japanese word kaiju originally referred to monsters and creatures from ancient Japanese legends. It earlier appeared in the Chinese classics of mountains and seas. There are no traditional depictions of kaiju or kaiju-like creatures among the yokai of Japanese folklore. However, it is possible to find megafauna in that mythology, i.e., Japanese dragons. After Sakoku had ended and Japan was open to foreign relations in the mid-19th century, the term kaiju came to be used to express concepts from paleontology and legendary creatures from around the world. For example, the extinct Ceratosaurus-like cryptid feature of the monster of Partridge Creek by French writer George Dumphy was referred to as a kaiju. It is worthy of note that during the Meiji era, Jules Verne's work were introduced to the Japanese public, achieving great success around 1890. Genre elements were present at the end of Winsor McCrae's 1921 animated short Dreams of the Rarebit Fiend, The Pet, in which a mysterious giant animal started destroying the city, until it's countered by a massive airstrike. It was based on a 1905 episode of McKay's comic strip series. The 1925 movie The Lost World, adapted from Arthur Conan Doyle's 1912 novel of the same name, featured many dinosaurs, including a brontosaurus that breaks loose in London and destroys Tower Bridge. The dinosaurs of The Lost World were animated by pioneering stop-motion techniques by Willis H. O'Brien, who would some years later animate the giant gorilla-like creature breaking loose in New York City for the 1933 movie King Kong. The enormous success of King Kong can be seen as a definitive breakthrough of monster movies. RKO Pictures later licensed the King Kong character to Japanese studio Toho, resulting in a co-production of King Kong versus Gojira, or Godzilla as it's referred to in American English, and King Kong Escapes, both directed by Ishiro Honda. Yoshiro Inomasa directed The Great Buddha Arrival in 1934. Although the original film is now lost, stills of the film have survived and is one of the earliest examples of kaiju film in Japan's cinematic history. In 1942, Fleischer Studios released The Arctic Giant, the fourth of 17 animated short films based upon the DC Comics character Superman, in which he has to stop a giant dinosaur from attacking the city of Metropolis. Ray Bradbury's short story, The Foghorn, serves as the basis for The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, featuring a fictional dinosaur animated by Ray Harryhausen, which is released from its frozen hibernated state by an atomic bomb test within the Arctic Circle. The American movie was released in Japan in 1954 under the title The Atomic Kaiju Appears, making the first use of the genre's name in film. However, Gojira, or Godzilla, is commonly regarded as the first Japanese kaiju film and was released also in 1954. Tomiyuki Tanaka, a producer for Toho Studios in Tokyo, needed a film to be released after the previous project was halted. Seeing how well the Hollywood giant monster movie genre films King Kong and The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms had done in Japanese box office, and himself a fan of these films, he set out to make a new movie based on them and created Gojira. The term kaiju translates literally to strange beast. Kaiju can be antagonistic, protagonistic, or a neutral force of nature, but more specifically as a preternatural creature of divine power. Succinctly, they are not merely big animals. Gojira, for example, from its first appearance in the initial 1954 entry in the Gojira franchise, has manifested all of these aspects. Other examples of kaiju include Rodan, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Anguirus, King Kong, Gamera, Daimajin, Gappa, Gulela, and other cybernetic characters including Mogaera, Mechanicong, Mechagodzilla, Gigan. And kaiju can also be used as a noun to refer to the monsters themselves. Daikaiju literally translates as giant kaiju or great kaiju. This hyperbolic term was used to denote greatness in the subject of kaiju. The prefix dai emphasized the great size, power, and or status. The first known appearance of the term daikaiju in the 20th century was in the publicity materials for the original 1954 release of Gojira. Seijin, star people, appears within Japanese words for extraterrestrial aliens, such as Keisei-jin, which means Martian. Aliens can also be called Uchujin, which means spacemen. Among the best-known Seijin in the genre can be found in the Ultra series, such as Alien Baltan from Ultraman, a race of cicada-like aliens who have gone on to become one of the franchise's most enduring and recurring characters other than the Ultras themselves. That is basically it for my notes on Kaijin and Daikaijin. Donald, please take it away.
Something I'm really curious about, I guess maybe it's just me. Why is it that I only became acquainted with the name Kaiju within the last year or two? Is there something that happened that brought that name more mainstream?
Yes. So, okay. So, a couple of things about terms. Some of this is, etymology. Some of it is my personal feelings, right? So, in lore, these kaiju are not yokai, right? Yokai are spirits, and they're usually kind of weird. A lot of them are like animated objects. Yokai refers to the spirits that are in everything, which goes into Japanese, Asian, really, philosophy, religion, and all of that. So yokai are more like ghosts and demons kind of thing.
You can keep them in a watch. I know that.
Kami are the natural spirits that exist. You see them in like Studio Ghibli productions like Totoro. Kami are could be considered the predecessors of kaiju, but they are not in themselves kaiju, right? Kami typically don't have a whole lot of power, and the ones that are really powerful get kind of elevated to almost a godlike status, like your Eastern dragons and things like that, where people worship them to keep them happy, to keep them from being angry with them, right? Kaiju, like you said, is a strange beast, creature, whatever. Daikaiju means a larger version, right? But it's not necessarily just physical size, greater power, greater status, whatever. But it's typically, people hardly ever use the word Daikaiju. It's almost always shortened to just kaiju.
Is that because
my adrenaline is so up on this because I have loved giant monster movies of all types since I was a kid. So forgive me if I go too fast and overdo things a little bit, but this is a genre of a subgenre of films that of entertainment that I just absolutely love.
Well, this is this is why we wanted you here for this one.
Yes.
To answer Jeff's question, so kaiju, I would say the reason you've only become familiar with it fairly recently is because you're not necessarily a fan of the genre. You're not a big fan of giant monster movies, right? It's not used a whole lot in the West because we typically just say like giant monster movies or Godzilla movies, right? Saying Godzilla movies is almost like saying Band-Aid instead of adhesive bandage or Q-tip instead of cotton swab because Godzilla has become so synonymous. And almost every one of the kaiju that you named are from Toho Studios. They just went nuts with it and created so many memorable creatures in their one of the earliest film-wise versions of a shared universe as well, because a lot of those creatures were in their own standalone movies, disconnected from the Godzilla universe, and then were gradually brought into the Godzilla universe. Kaiju really, from my understanding, took off in the West thanks to Pacific Rim. Because the giant creatures that they fought, they specifically called them kaiju, which may lead some people to misunderstand and think that kaiju specifically refers to the monsters from Pacific Rim, but it's not. They just named them that because that was what they were. Right? Okay, so my take on kaiju, right? So to me, King Kong, Mighty Joe Young, the dinosaurs from Jurassic Park, some people consider those kaiju. I don't, because they're just large, normal creatures, or anachronistic normal creatures in the case of the dinosaurs. You know, when you look at Lost World, when you look at Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth, right? They're just the land that time forgot. They're just regular dinosaurs that have been living unknown to us in some pocket somewhere, or brought back by science. Same thing goes for
Beast from 20,000 Fathoms.
Yeah, so that's a little different because that's not like a real dinosaur. So that gets that. So it's already kind of a gray area. It gets a little grayer there because I believe in that movie it's a Rhedosaurus or a Rhodosaurus, which is just kind of a made up name. In some of the Toho movies, the progenitor prior to the atomic testing for Godzilla's creation was a Godzillasaurus, which, so dinosaur, but it's not a real dinosaur, right? So to me, even going back to like 50s American sci-fi, like the Deadly Mantis, them, they could be considered kaiju, but I personally don't, just because they're just big creatures. There's nothing else unusual about them.
That's interesting because a lot of people are calling, and this is why I was, I guess, a little surprised, but now I'm not as much, that you didn't like the Book of Boba Fett as much as I thought you would. A lot of people are saying it had kaiju in Star Wars because of the Rancor.
It's a Rancor.
Right. So alien creatures, that ends up kind of being a weird area, right? Because some of the kaiju in the Godzilla universe, King Ghidorah, Gigan, they're alien. So, but I don't know. So Gigan's a cyborg. But King Ghidorah itself, it's got special powers and things. So again, the gray area gets even grayer, right? But yeah, I could see a case being made for the Rancor. It's big, but it's not necessarily gigantic, right? But you also had in the Star Wars prequels the giant creatures in the waters of Naboo, right? Things like that. So are they kaiju? Are they aliens? You can even make the case in Pacific Rim. You know, the kaiju that come through, they're really just alien creatures being forced through a portal, right? I would still consider them kaiju. A synonym for alien is strange, right? So I'm perfectly okay with calling alien creatures kaiju. And if people want to consider Rancor kaiju, have at it. If it brings more fans to the fold, you know, have at it. Which I also got to touch on. Nerdery this is almost like a golden age, right? So for a long time, the only kaiju movies we had were really Godzilla movies, right? Pacific Rim, which of course is helped along by mechs, which is a whole nother genre, right? But who doesn't love a giant robot slugging out with a giant monster?
Agree wholeheartedly.
You know, so Godzilla movies were kind of sparse, right? But with the Legendary movies, with Toho licensing new Japanese movies, it's just like with board games, right? So it's not just that the technology's improved, so the special effects are better. Storytelling has improved. cinematography itself has improved. And so we've got a whole bunch of new stuff that's come out, that is going to come out just in the last 5 years. Just like with board games, we are almost inundated with cool new stuff that for a while was just such a fringe, a niche element.
Well, and you talk about new. I don't remember if it was you, Don, on Facebook, or if it was Michael Shanks from Two Geeks and a Microphone. One of the two. One of you posted that the new Godzilla movie was the greatest Godzilla movie ever.
Godzilla -1 is, so for me, Gojira is still the original, is still the top. And there's a specific reason for that. Godzilla -1 is fantastic. It's not big monsters slugging it out, right? So the original Gojira, and this goes back to Zig mentioned Lucky Dragon number 5, right? This is a real boat. This is a fishing boat. They were too close to one of the atomic testing sites when the bomb went off. They were
Bikini Atoll.
Yes, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah,
history is not my strong suit. They got radiated. They got covered in radioactive ash. When they came back to port, 100 feet away from the boat, you were detecting high levels of radiation. And there's a whole story. There's a great documentary about the Daigo Fukuryu Maru, which is Lucky Dragon number 5, and what they went through. And so that happened in early 1954. I want to say around March. And that was a big influence. There are scenes in the original Gojira that are taken from that. And like Zig touched on, this is where I think sci-fi in general shines, is at its best, is as metaphor, right? So he's a force of nature. He is a creature that we have created unintentionally through our meddling with things that we don't fully understand. He is not destroying Japan because he hates people or anything like that. He is a creature who has no family. Nothing else like him exists, and he is in pain. If you don't know, he's not green. His skin is actually kind of a blackish, gray, charred kind of thing, and it's specifically modeled after keloid scars, radiation burns. His whole body is covered in radiation burns. And if you watch the original Gojira, the 1954 one, there are some heartbreaking scenes of people who have suffered radiation burns and radiation poisoning. And that's what he was trying to get across. He wasn't trying to make a giant monster movie, right? He was trying to show the horrors that the atomic age was ushering in. And like I said, all good sci-fi with a metaphor. It's a warning. Be careful what you do. If you fuck around, you're gonna find out.
Well, and I was going to say, because I just heard this song the other day. I'm curious if this song is about kaiju, but it's Saron's Supernature. Have you ever heard that from the 70s?
I have not.
You ought to listen to the words behind the song, because it talks about basically creatures that we made and turned on us.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's it's a super common theme. I mean, not necessarily always creatures, but it's a super common theme in sci-fi. I mean, that was what the whole Jurassic Park
Right.
series was built on. It's like, if you're gonna do stuff, be prepared for unexpected stuff to happen.
Life
So
always finds a way.
yeah, well, and like I said, fuck around and find out. So yeah, that's why it's my favorite, because it's a metaphor for atomic testing, dabbling in nuclear power. It's one of the reasons why I like the American movie Them so much, with the giant ants, because these
I
movies
just
are
watched
not.
that a couple of weeks ago. It still holds up. It's beautiful.
Yeah, these are not about the monsters themselves. They're about the situations around them and the impact it has on the lives of people. When they redid it with Raymond Burr as Godzilla King of the Monsters in I believe it was 1955, and released it in the U.S., that was kind of watered down a little bit, the whole metaphor. I love that movie as well. Raymond Burr is a great actor. His character's voiceover in scenes is very, very impactful. But it becomes more of a Yay USA movie than what was originally intended. Still a very good movie, but it loses a little bit. The only other movies in Godzilla's history, we're talking, 70 years.
Yeah.
And something like 40 some odd films. Only a few have gone back to that original metaphor of what Godzilla is, and that's Shin Godzilla, which came out a couple years ago. Fantastic film. It divided the fan base a lot because they changed Godzilla's appearance and story a lot, but it's a new telling of Godzilla, right? It's like a retelling of the origin based in modern day. And again, it's a metaphor in that movie for the inability of bureaucracy to act quickly to emergencies, especially in Japan. I think a lot of people who don't know, and of course,
Like a reaction to Fukushima.
yeah, I mean, that's, that was part of it too. Because again, there was this big disaster, and because Japanese bureaucracy likes to do meetings and stuff like that, they unfortunately don't react quickly. If you're not aware of that aspect of their government, you kind of miss part of the point of Shin Godzilla, right? It also touches on Japan's reliance on outside military like the U.S. for their defense, which goes into a whole bunch of World War II history and all of that. So it has that. Again, Godzilla's created because somebody was fucking around with stuff, and I think people that don't like it maybe don't understand the story fully. Because again, to me, this is a creature that in Shin Godzilla, he goes through several iterations, right? The big bipedal monster doesn't appear toward the very end. He goes through some stages, some of which admittedly look a little goofy, but through the whole thing, the impression I get is, so this creature is being forced to evolve constantly based on its environment, right? It comes out of the water, ends up on land, it grows legs and arms. You don't see it, but that's the premise. And it's in constant pain. Again, we've created a creature that never asked to be around. Something completely unique. It's got no family. It's never going to have progeny. It has nothing to live or survive for, right? And it's in constant pain, and it's our fault, And then in the new one now, Godzilla -1, Godzilla's not in it a whole lot because he's not really the point. He's a force of nature that has been unleashed, and in this case, so the -1 comes from because of the war. Japan is at zero, right? Economically, they can't afford to do anything. They're not allowed to do some things, and then Godzilla shows up, and now they're in the red. So that's hence the -1, right? They don't have a military anymore to deal with him. They can't rely on other militaries to help them. And so what the story is really about is community coming together, fighting against something that they're pretty sure they have absolutely no chance of stopping, and saying, you know what, though, if we don't do it, who will? We've got to stand up for ourselves, and doing what they have to do to try and stop, an atomic fire-breathing creature that towers over their buildings. So yeah, and I gotta say, for Godzilla -1, this was made on a budget of about $15 million.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah. All of the Godzilla effects are CGI. There's no There's the first one with absolutely no practical effects.
Oh, there's no guy in a rubber suit?
No.
Charge it through.
Not even motion capture. Right?
Oh, wow.
So this is all CGI. They did 500 terabytes just doing the water effects.
Oh.
Because, water's hard to do.
Yeah. It's like hair.
Yeah, well, so water behaves differently in a big pool as opposed to the ocean. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of CGI and practical effects have failed before, is it's really hard to make the water look realistic. And they do such a good job.
I just looked it up as you were talking about it. Generally, I pay more attention to the audience score than the critic score when I look at Rotten Tomatoes rating system. Some people have a problem with Rotten Tomatoes, some don't. But anyway, I generally pay more attention to the audience score. But I was surprised when I pulled up Godzilla -1 that both the audience and the critics are giving it a 98%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It is so good. Now, of course, it's well made. It's a well-made Godzilla movie. So Godzilla in Japan, right? Because of its original movie, Japanese people love it, right? It's theirs too. This is something that they created that is known all over the world, that nobody else does like they do.
Yeah.
Right? Toho took this and did a whole bunch of other monster movies, and with varying degrees of success. Some of them got kind of silly, right? There were copiers, like Gamera. Gorgo was a British movie that was similar. There's Gappa, the Triphibian monster, which was another, giant creatures. I believe that was also based in England. I think England is what gets destroyed there. London. But copied all over the world, but none of them have had the kind of success that Godzilla had. So very near and dear. Godzilla was almost done. Godzilla's gone through several stages, right? So from the original Godzilla until like 1984 was the Showa era. And that's where a lot of your rubber suited guys, monsters battling out in the city. And the focus was really, for the most of them, after the original, on the monsters fighting out and wrecking stuff, right? The big recurring theme is that these creatures are so big and powerful that military might even cool new pseudoscience super weapons can't really stop them. But they got to try. And then, things, production slows down. They bring Godzilla back in 85. That's for the Heisei era. So now there's still guys in suit, but there's also like animatronics and better special effects. And those go through. And it's important to notice there's not really a canon timeline here, right? They're all kind of, some of them relate to each other. Most of them are standalone movies. And again, with varying degrees of success. There's almost always a little bit of social commentary in there somewhere. But it was less important in a lot of the movies. And then it died off, slowed down a little bit. And then there's another resurgence for the Millennium era of movies, which started with Godzilla 2000. The premise for that era of movies, with the exception of two specific ones, was each of those movies was a direct sequel to the original Godzilla. So ignore everything else. Godzilla 2000 is a sequel to Gojira. Godzilla versus Megaguirus is a sequel to Gojira. They did, when they created the new Mechagodzilla for that era of movies, named Kiryu, they did make a couple of movies involving Kiryu that tied together and were sequels to each other. But that was it. Other than that, they tended to be standalone movies. And then Godzilla Final Wars in 2004 was going to be the last Godzilla movie, at least for
a while.
Yeah. I'm sure Toho knew that at some point they're going to bring it back, but it was going to be at least like a 10-year hiatus, right? And there was. We didn't get anything really new for a long time until 2016 for Shin Godzilla, which ushered in a new era. Don't know if there'll be any sequels to that, but they did create a very interesting monster concept there. And then, like I said, with this resurgence, with this new golden age for kaiju movies, we've had there's been an animated trilogy, an animated trilogy on Netflix, an animated series, one season series on Netflix called Godzilla Singular Point. Plus, we've got the Legendary movies, the Monarch series that's playing now on Apple TV. There's a lot there. There's so much to explore, and each one is different, right? So, as a fan of the genre, I love everything. Mm-hmm. Some people absolutely hate Shin Godzilla. I'm sure there are some people that don't like Godzilla -1 because he's not as big and badass or whatever. But you just got to take them for what they are, right? And they're each good movies. Even the 1998 American one from Sony, mm-hmm. I think it's a terrible Godzilla movie, but I think it's a good and fun giant monster kaiju movie.
Okay.
Right? It misses a lot of the points of Godzilla. There's, it focuses too much on the action and destruction, right? And look at this cool creature we had created for the movie.
Oh, look at this! Look at this cool creature tearing this building down.
Right. That being said, though, while I'm not a big fan of that movie, the animated series based off of that movie, Godzilla, the animated series, was actually pretty good. Because what they did was they introduced in the animated series other giant monsters for that Godzilla to fight. So,
Which was the
I
one
do
with,
also want to mention.
which was the
What?
one with which Godzilla movie was it with Bryan Cranston in it?
That was the first of the legendary movies.
Okay, that was pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, I love them
For
all.
not being a
Bryan
Godzilla fan, so
Yeah, Bryan Cranston brought a lot to that movie.
Mhm.
Every kind of universally through the fandom, everybody was disappointed that his character didn't make it through. Because he was immediately from the start of the movie your emotional investment in what was going on, right? And he did a fabulous job, and I wish they could do more with him.
Bryan Cranston, made of 80% gravitas.
I do also want to mention there's a bunch of good documentaries out there about Godzilla movies, stuff like that. I don't remember the name of the one. Somebody put together like a GoFundMe Kickstarter thing to raise money so he could go to Japan and interview people and do stuff like that. I apologize to the guy that made it. I don't remember the name of it, but that's a really cool thing to watch. There is, in 2008, there was a documentary made called Bringing Godzilla Down to Size, The Art of Japanese Special Effects. The early Japanese movies, what these guys did in making practical effects that were cities and landscapes in miniature was phenomenal. And these guys overworked and underpaid for sure. And definitely
the miniature workers on the Godzilla movies from the 60s? Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, I mean, because, building the buildings and making it to... the original Godzilla versus King Kong, when King Kong pulls the tree out of the ground and shoves it in Godzilla's mouth. I mean, it has roots. They did stuff like that, and they did such a good job. So anybody who's interested in either miniature practical effects or Godzilla movies, like I said, Bringing Godzilla Down to Size from 2008, fantastic movie about that. Lots of other as a lover of giant monster movies, of course I love atomic horror B movies, right? Like we touched on them, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms,
them,
and another shout out to Ray Harryhausen, 20 Million Miles to Earth.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And the good movies still continue to be made. The kaiju genre outside of Godzilla isn't as popular.
It's for my
The
notes,
Gamera
everyone.
movies, kind of a ripoff. They came after, like 10 years after Giant Turtle. So the original Gamera was a little more like the original Godzilla, where Gamera was an unstoppable force of nature, right? It wasn't until the second movie, when he fights another giant creature, that he becomes kind of a protector. And even up to the third movie, though, he's still big and destructive. And he's saving us from what would become a recurring villain in the Gamera universe, which is Gaios. Big giant bat bird thing. And meant to be scary. And they were still kind of leaning on that aspect. And that after that, however, unfortunately, the Gamera movies got worse and worse. To the point where one of the last movies of their Showa era, in 1980, was Gamera Super Monster, which was like 30% archive footage from previous movies. They were just phoning it in at that point.
Yeah. Okay. So Gamera was another studio, not Toho, trying to capture Godzilla.
Katakawa.
Yeah.
And I think it was distributed by Daiei. A completely different studio. Probably the only other studio that had success with a franchise, a kaiju franchise like that.
the first time I met Don, the fact that he knew what Gamera was, I found fascinating because for years I thought I was the only person who had ever seen that movie.
And so from 1980 to 95, no Gamera, right? So the big gap there, 15 years. Then they entered their Heisei era with a trilogy of movies, Gamera Guardian of the Universe, right? Completely updated special effects, completely updated cinematography, and those three movies, especially the first one, Gamera Guardian of the Universe, rival the best of the Godzilla movies from any era.
Oh, wow.
They are incredibly well done, great human story, well paced through the movies. I just can't emphasize enough that those are absolutely fantastic, and I think a must see for any kaiju fan who hasn't already seen them. And there's been some good ones out of Korea as well. There's Yongari. There's one called Pulgasari. So this one, I forget who was the leader of North Korea at the time, kidnaps a director and makes him make a kaiju movie. I haven't seen it myself, kind of hard to find. But yeah, I mean, he wanted a national kaiju movie like Godzilla so bad that he kidnapped the director from another country and made him make a movie.
Wow. Did the guy get to go back?
I think he escaped. Because I mean, it's not like he's got military secrets or anything, so yeah. I don't think we were keeping that close an eye on him. But
yeah,
you know, and then,
it's like he knows how to get guys in rubber suits.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he doesn't have the nuclear codes or anything like that. But recently, out of South Korea, there's a movie called The Host. Oh my God! It may. I say recently. I don't remember what year it came out. It could be 10 years old by now. It's not a giant creature, knocking down skyscrapers. Definitely falls into the kaiju thing where it's a created thing because people were stupid. It's called The Host. It's very good. There's a recent Northern European movie called Troll.
I have seen bits of Troll.
It's actually very good. And again, so people focus on the giant monsters, right? Whether it's guys in rubber suits or CGI or, combination. The best of these movies, just like with anything else, they're not focused on that, right? The human story is what makes the whole story captivating.
Moana.
Huh?
Moana.
What about it? I'm sorry, did we segue to Disney porn?
Moana, the giant volcanic creature. When Moana gives her heart back, she becomes the beautiful Pele, and then lays
Not
down.
Kaiju, though. I mean, that's supernatural. That's literally a god.
Okay.
So doesn't fall under kaiju.
Okay.
Well, and some other things that spawned off too, and Zig, you ought to write these notes down for future episodes. Spawned off board games. Gamerauders, King of Tokyo. Those are the two that came right to mind.
Oh, there's a kaiju one too.
There's actually a number of kaiju ones, big and small. There's Godzilla Tokyo SOS. There's Godzilla Clash. God, I own that one too. I can't remember the name of it. There's like a little card game called Kaiju Incorporated.
What's the one with the eyeball? The big eyeball monster? Because that's always my favorite one to play. I think it's Monsters Menace America.
Monsters
Menace America, yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of those. So that's kind of what those games do, except for the ones that are specifically Godzilla, right? They blend the atomic horror of the 50s in the U.S. with the kaiju movies, right? Mm-hmm. So you have things like the military robot that's built to fight the monsters, where you have the the alien creature where you have the mad scientist has created something, where you have the natural creature that was awakened, and those games are all of the ones that I've played have been fun to play.
Nice.
Yeah, I've only played King of Tokyo and Gamma Marauders, so. Oh no,
No,
I played Monsters Menace America.
Yeah.
I played that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to go into specifics, right? Because I could do an hour or so on each individual movie. So I also want to mention some of the lesser known ones from Toho that are. Who is blowing up my phone?
It's me. I'm making notes. It's me making notes to put stuff in.
Because he doesn't know how to use something like OneNote, so he's using it in text.
Because I can pull it up later on.
You can pull up OneNote later on.
I mentioned that Toho, one of the first, if not the first, to have that shared universe, right? So Rodan, separate movie to begin with, and really kind of more of a horror movie. It's got some scenes in there, which are evocative of some scenes from the movie Them, right, where they discover the nest for Rodan. Mothra was originally a standalone movie.
With the tiny women who sing to Mothra.
Yeah, well, so, and at the time, Mothra eventually goes on to become, more of like a protector of humanity, protector of Earth kind of thing. But at the beginning, it was still kind of, people stole her egg. She wanted it back. Mm-hmm. She's not. She's there because she's pissed. Not to help anybody. Same with Gorgo. They captured the young of this creature and pissed it off, and now it's trashing downtown London or whatever because it wants its baby back. This is another recurring thing in sci-fi movies, right? We go somewhere, we find a cool creature, and we bring it back, not thinking about the consequences. That goes all the way back to King Kong with, it's like, oh, it's a giant ape. Won't this be fun to chain up and have in the middle of Times Square?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? It's not.
Oh, look, he's climbing the Empire State Building. Huh.
There's Varan the Unbelievable, which only appears in, I think, one other Toho Godzilla movie, and that's Destroy All Monsters, because they basically pulled almost everybody to appear in
Destroy All Monsters is incredible.
Yeah. It's one of those, if you don't, it's one of those that should be high on the list to see as far as, the older Godzilla movies. Also in that movie is Manda, the big snake-like Asian dragon-looking creature, which was from the movie Atragon, which was more about a really cool submarine. But again, a standalone movie. And unfortunately, two movies that kind of tie together. Frankenstein Conquers the World, which, just like Toho taking King Kong and doing something with it, kind of unusual to see them reach out and take Frankenstein.
And make a giant Frankenstein?
But what they did was, so Frankenstein, the creature, not the doctor, the creature's heart was still alive. So they were screwing around with it, trying to figure out why it was still beating, and accidentally make a giant Frankenstein, who then goes on to fight another monster. And it's actually a pretty good movie. Kind of a loose sequel to that is another one of Toho's best movies in the genre, War of the Gargantuas.
War of the Gargantuas.
Because the twin creatures, are actually made from or grown from or are born because of the Frankenstein cells from the, almost universally loved as far as movies from that genre and that era. It's a really great movie, great human element. To have two creatures that are related, one's good and one's bad, as kaiju is unique. I haven't seen that done in any other movie. And a lot of fans, Toho, if you're out there listening, a lot of fans would love to see you update that movie, bring the gargantuas back in some way, something, because we love that movie, we love those creatures, and we'd love to see them again.
I'm sure
So
Toho's,
if you guys can get
I'm sure
Toho
Toho's, I'm sure he's a listener.
yeah.
Toho Studios. Yeah,
Let's see
Toho
here.
Studios. Yeah. Hey, if you're listening, hey, if you want to sponsor us, Toho Studios, give us a call.
Yeah,
we'll work something out.
We've got 1,210 downloads from Asia, so he's probably in there.
Yeah, somebody.
Yeah. So and then of course another unique creature. So this is for me, right? So you had Godzilla versus King Kong. And I'll go ahead and dispel the myth here. A lot of people seem to think there's two endings, right? One for Japan, one for the US, one where King Kong wins.
There isn't.
There's not. There's one ending.
It's a sound. The only difference is a sound. You get
King Kong swims away. You don't see anything Godzilla. It's left ambiguous as to who the winner is. There is no other ending. Leave it alone, people. I mean, this is a rumor that predates the internet.
Mm-hmm.
We have the internet now. Share it around. Share it out there. One ending, right? But anyway, they made a sequel to that. They used King Kong in a second movie called King Kong Escapes, starring the absolutely lovely Linda Miller, who is still very active on the con circuit. I've never met her, but I heard she's absolutely delightful. In that movie, the evil scientist makes a mechanical King Kong. So this is one of the earliest iterations of making a robot version of a kaiju. It wasn't made to fight King Kong, but this is one of the earliest examples of that. And that's another thing that I would like to see Toho bring back, is the mecha versions of Godzilla and King Kong. Because they're interesting, and I think that appeals to mecha are a slightly different genre than kaiju, but as we've seen, mecha and kaiju go together like peanut butter and booze.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
So, yeah, I don't know where we're at time wise.
I think we could probably wrap this one up. Thank you.
I mean, this
Thank
is
you
a good.
so much.
This
Yes.
is a good breaking off point, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much. We'll come back and talk about this later. I'm okay with this.
Yeah, I will come back to talk kaiju anytime. I will come back from the dead.
Yeah, we appreciate Don helping out with that. I know Zig wanted to cover the genre because it's definitely a nerdery topic, and we needed Don for this. I'd mentioned the new Godzilla -1. I think it's very ironic that we had this episode scheduled in advance. Ironically, Two Geeks and a Microphone just did their review of it yesterday.
Yes.
We're recording this, which I think is so funny. So go over and listen to them. They'll give the full review of the movie, and you can find out for yourself if the critics in the audience are right on that. But Don, thank you for all your information on that. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So with that, we'll step over to the murdery side of the house.
Murder.
For today, I got my information off CBS News, the Texas Department of Public Safety, KRGV News, Texas Monthly, and Wikipedia. And this is the murder of Irene Garza.
Irene Garza.
Happened right here up the road from me.
What?
Yep, found this one. So Irene Garza was an American school teacher and beauty queen whose death was the subject of investigation for several decades. She was last seen alive on April 16th, 1960, when she went to confession at a church in McAllen, Texas. She was reported missing the following morning. And following the largest volunteer search to that date in the Rio Grande Valley, Garza's body was discovered in a canal on April 21st. An autopsy did conclude she had been sexually assaulted before being killed, and the cause of death was actually suffocation. She was born in 1934. Her parents, Nicholas and Josephina, owned a dry cleaning business in McAllen, which is in the South Texas border region, which we call the Rio Grande Valley down here. By the time Garza was a teenager, her parents' business had become successful, and the family was able to move to the south side of McAllen to a more affluent area on the north, from the south side to a more affluent area on the north side. She graduated from McAllen High School, where she'd become the first Latina to perform as a twirler or head drum majorette. And she was crowned the 1958 Miss All South Texas Sweetheart and was a homecoming queen at Pan American College. At the time of her death, Garza was a second-grade school teacher. She taught indigent students at an elementary school on the south side of McAllen at Thigpen Elementary. In a letter written to her friend before her disappearance, she described herself as extremely shy but expressed fulfillment in her work, noting she had recently become the secretary of her parent-teacher association. Irene said that she was beginning to feel more confident in herself. She was a member of the Legion of Mary, and she took her Catholic faith seriously. In her letter, Irene indicated that she found comfort in attending daily Mass and communion, and her job was a great source of pride. She wrote, "These children I am teaching have been such a joy to me." But it was her faith, which she returned to again and again in her letter, that sustained her. She said, "Remember the last time we talked, I told you I was afraid of death. Well, I think I'm cured. You see, I'm going to communion and Mass daily, and you can't imagine the courage and faith and happiness it's given me." On Saturday, April 16th, 1960, Irene told her parents, who she lived with, she was going to confession at the Sacred Heart Church in McAllen. She borrowed the family car and promised she wouldn't be long. She left her parents' house around 6:30 in the evening and made the 12-block drive to the Sacred Heart Church. And she was often very conspicuous in the congregation because of her beauty, and several parishioners remember seeing her at the church that night. She rarely went unnoticed. Some would-be suitors came to Mass just to admire her, and that night, as people waited to give their confessions, many caught sight of her. One parishioner noticed Irene make the sign of the cross as she entered the sanctuary. Another parishioner saw her kneeling by herself in a pew on the 5th row. A third remembered Irene asking if she might edge in front of her in the long confession line because she was running late. And some recalled her draping a white lace veil over her head, while others said she had stepped out of line if turning to go, yet no one ever saw her leave the church that night. When her parents didn't hear from her that evening, they thought that she had stayed at church for the Easter Vigil Mass. But when she didn't return home by 3 a.m., they went to McAllen Police Department to report their daughter missing. On April 18th, a trail of evidence stretched several hundred yards down a McAllen Road. Her vehicle was located near the church, and authorities and volunteers started the search that again was the largest in the Rio Grande history at that time, Rio Grande Valley. A single high-heeled shoe which had been cast aside the road was the first clue that she was possibly dead. A passerby named P.W. Miller happened upon it on an empty stretch of McCall Road where it lay 2 inches from the curb. And it was a small beige Fiancé's brand pump which fit a woman's left foot. It was slightly scuffed and its heel tap was missing, and Irene's family confirmed that she had worn the same shoe to confession. The trail of evidence continued north, scattered alongside the road. 300 yards from the spot where the shoe had landed on the pavement, a fellow teacher, Alfredo Barrera, caught sight the following morning of what appeared to be a black patent leather purse lying in the middle of the field. It looked like it had been flung out the window of a passing car. He used a stick to pick it up so investigators could dust it for fingerprints, but none were found, but Irene's driver's license was discovered inside. And still farther north, investigators came across a piece of white lace crumpled in the bush. 70 members of Hidalgo County's Sheriff's Posse, many on horseback, fanned out through the orange groves and mesquite thickets east of McCall Road in the days that followed to look for Irene. Detectives combed through brush on foot and canvassed the 32-square block area surrounding Sacred Heart, going house to house. Skin divers dragged irrigation canals that fed off the Rio Grande, and 2 Border Patrol planes circled overhead. 65 National Guardsmen were called out to assist with what had become the most extensive investigations in Valley history, and detectives followed up on hundreds of leads. A woman claiming to be Irene called her home, saying she had been kidnapped and taken to a hotel in nearby Hidalgo, and dozens of police officers raced there only to discover it was a hoax. Another person told an Edinburgh waitress that he had killed Garza, and he warned, "You are next," but it was found to be made a joke after the man had been drinking heavily. Irene's body was found face down in a canal on April 21st in an area several miles away from the other evidence, and a crowd gathered to watch as police, detectives, and sheriff's deputies used a tarp to lift her body from the water. She was found fully dressed except for her shoes and underwear, and her lavender blouse had been unbuttoned. From the post-mortem examination, medical examiners could tell that Garza had died of suffocation, and she had been raped while unconscious and beaten. There was bruising over both of her eyes and to the right side of her face, and any physical evidence that might have identified an attacker, such as hair, blood, or semen, appear to have been washed away during the time the body spent in the canal. The state of decomposition suggested that she had been dead slightly fewer than 4 days, giving rise to speculation she had been held captive for up to a day before she was killed. And according to her death certificate, she had been raped while in a coma. Her brother-in-law, who positively identified her at the morgue that morning, was so horrified by the sight of her that he ran from the room. Law enforcement questioned about 500 people across several Texas cities, including known sex offenders and Garza's family members, co-workers, and ex-boyfriends. They carried out almost 50 polygraph examinations and offered a $2,500 reward for information about her death, which was larger than any amount of money previously offered in a Rio Grande Valley murder case. South Texas businessmen later posted $10,000 reward money. The local newspapers, which ran front-page articles about the murder of the dark-eyed former beauty queen, were rife with speculation. The Morning Star wrote a week after her body was found, quote, "The city has been in a state of near hysteria as rumors flew thick and fast. Rumors as to the identity of the murderer went beyond the ridiculous, and it appeared that everyone was prepared to believe anything." One story, first advanced by a newspaper in Monterrey, Mexico, but quickly debunked by police, was that the killer was Leo de Leon, who was a prominent McAllen citizen who died of a heart attack 3 days after Irene disappeared. Others hypothesized she had been killed by a transient or perhaps a frustrated suitor. But as for the wild rumors that were speculating around the valley, the newspapers referred to them only elliptically. The theory that kept most of McAllen whispering never appeared in print. People wondered about it privately in low voices after children had gone to bed. Some even made the sign of the cross and offered words of contrition for even entertaining such an unholy idea. Dios perdonanos, they said, which means God, please forgive us. Rumor had it that Irene's killer was a priest.
Ooh.
The priest who last heard Irene's confession, Father John Biet, maybe, who was 27 at the time, came under suspicion soon after her disappearance. He'd been at the McAllen Church since completing seminary training in San Antonio, and church members reported that his confession line moved slowly on the night of Irene's disappearance and that he was away from the sanctuary several times. Fellow priests had noticed scratch marks on his hands after Easter Vigil Mass, and it said it was irregular for him to have taken Irene to the church rectory to hear her confession face-to-face, as she had reportedly done that night. Initially, he claimed that Irene had come to the rectory to discuss a question of conscience with him that he could not disclose, after which he sent her to the sanctuary to confess. When the canal was drained several days after the discovery of Irene's body, a photo slide viewer was found. The police appealed to the public in help for finding the slide viewer's owner, and 2 days later, Father Fiat stepped forward and said that he had purchased it the previous summer at the Port Isabel drugstore, but he never explained how the slide viewer ended up in the canal. Police brought him in for questioning and even issued polygraph tests, and McAllen police initially stated that he passed the polygraph test, but the tests were later said to be inconclusive. He initially denied hearing Irene's confession in the rectory, but later admitted to having done so, and he accounted for his absence from the sanctuary by claiming he had broken his glasses that night. He said that he often played with his glasses nervously as he listened to confession. He stated that he had driven back to his church's pastoral house, which was a short drive away, to get another pair of glasses, and when he arrived, he had no keys, so he had to climb into the house on the second floor. He said he sustained the scratches on his hands as he was climbing outside of the brick structure. 3 weeks before Irene's death, a woman named Maria America Guerrera had been sexually assaulted while kneeling at the communion rail at another Catholic church in the McAllen area. No sooner had she begun to pray, Guerrero said that a man grabbed her from the behind and tried to clamp a rag over her mouth. Screaming, she fell backwards onto the floor where her attacker struggled to cover her mouth with his hands, and she bit down on his fingers until she drew blood. As he threw her to a wall, she ran out a side door to the church, and she told police that she thought the man was a priest. Rumor held that Fiat was responsible, but local church leaders discouraged people from considering the possibility that a priest could have even been involved in a violent crime.
Yeah, and we all know that is not exactly correct. Boston.
Around McAllen, the theory that a priest had had a hand in both crimes could be broached only discreetly. Priests were viewed as literal men of God, absent of moral failings, not the subject of criminal inquiries. Fiat admitted to visiting a priest at the church on the day of Guerrera's attack, but he denied assaulting her. After Irene was murdered, Maria Guerrera picked out Father Fiat from a police lineup as the man who attacked her, and he was later charged with rape, but the trial ended in a hung jury. In 1962, rather than face a second trial, Fiat offered a plea of no contest to a misdemeanor charge of aggravated assault and paid a $500 fine. Years later, he said he didn't understand that a no contest plea would be considered a conviction in the case. After the legal proceedings in the Guerrera case, Fiat was sent to Assumption Abbey, which was a Trappist monastery in Missouri. An abbot at Assumption Abbey told monk Dale Tacheny that Fiat had killed someone and asked Tacheny to counsel Fiat for a few months to determine whether he had a disposition to become a monk. Tacheny said that Fiat confessed to hurting a young lady and murdering another one, but he said it was not his job to judge Fiat at the time, and Fiat's confession went unreported to authorities.
Call the police. I don't care what the Catholic Church says. It is still a crime in America to kill someone.
He didn't feel his job was to judge or report it at the time.
Oh, my God.
Fiat did not feel comfortable with the monastic lifestyle at Assumption Abbey. He was sent to Jimenez Springs, New Mexico, to a treatment retreat for troubled priests. I hate that we've covered this before, that there has to be such a retreat, but it was a retreat
because people. Okay,
go ahead.
I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it again. Predators seek out positions of moral authority.
Oh, yeah.
Easiest moral authority you can get is religious because it's not backed up by anything. A very controversial statement, but I'm going to say it anyway. Beware of men of the cloth.
And I don't necessarily agree with that.
Especially around your children, because you don't know which one is a predator and which one isn't.
I know you do have to be wary, but I wouldn't make that bold of a claim.
I would not let my children around any men of the cloth by themselves.
So I don't think that's a controversial statement in that
it proves to be true.
Predators seek out not only positions where they can wield authority, but positions where they can
gain someone's trust easily.
Well, there's an excuse to be around their victims. Right. So child predators want to be teachers, coaches, things like that. It doesn't mean that teaching or coaching or being a priest itself is bad. It's just that, unfortunately, because of the access and authority it gives you, predators will try to get those positions when they can.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just men in the cloth, because like Don said, teachers and coaches. You hear about teachers and coaches in the news all the time.
I wouldn't let my kids go around by themselves with teachers and coaches either.
No. So Father Fiat was sent to the treatment retreat for troubled priests, run by the servants of the Parcelet. after which he joined the order as a staff member and worked his way into a supervisory role at the center. Father James Porter came to the center after he was known to have had begun molesting children in the 1960s, and Fillette cleared him for placement in another parish. Porter was later defrocked and imprisoned for abusing as many as 100 children. Fillette left the priesthood in the 1970s. He married, moved to the Phoenix area, and had 3 children. He worked at the Society of St. Vincent de Paul as a food charity volunteer for 17 years. And finally, in 2002, Tachny from the monastery decided he could no longer keep Fillette's secret. So, thinking that the murder had taken place in San Antonio because Fillette had trained there, Tachny called authorities in that city, and the investigation into Irene Garza's death was reopened that year. Texas Rangers investigator Rudy Jaramillo contacted Father Joseph O'Brien, who was a priest who worked with Fillette at the time of Irene's death. And while O'Brien had told a television program in 2000 that he didn't know anything about the murder, he admitted to Jaramillo that Fillette had confessed shortly after it had taken place. Later in 2002, the polygraph examiner who had tested Fillette in 1960 said that he questioned the reported results. The initial report said that Fillette had passed the polygraph, but the report was later edited to say the reports were inconclusive, and the examiner felt all along that Fillette had failed the test. Rene Guerrera, who is no relation to Maria America, the district attorney of Hidalgo County from the 1980s until 2014, chose to not bring Irene's case before a grand jury until 2004. Despite the witnesses, Guerrera did not think they were credible, and Tachny, O'Brien, and Fillette did not receive subpoenas in the case, and the grand jury declined to indict Fillette. Father O'Brien died in 2005. Irene's cousin, Linda de la Vigna, recalls that Rene Guerrera confronting her in the courthouse and telling her she would never get an indictment in the case. Guerrera was reluctant to revisit the case, saying that the early police investigation had been shoddy and that O'Brien was suffering from dementia when he was questioned and that there was no physical evidence. He said that Jaramillo had inappropriately fed Tachny the location of the murder after the monk mistakenly said it occurred in San Antonio. And Guerrera angered Irene's family by asking, why would anyone be haunted by her death? She died. Her killer got away. In 2014, District Court Judge Ricardo Rodriguez campaigned to unseat Guerrera as the district attorney, and Irene's case rose as campaign issues. Rodriguez said he wanted justice for the Garza family and promised to take a new look at the case if he were elected. And in the days after Rodriguez did get elected as district attorney, Guerrera sought to appoint him as special prosecutor in the Garza case, but Rodriguez declined, saying he preferred to take a new look at the evidence once he officially took office in January of 2015. In April, he announced that the Garza case was reopened. And also in early 2004, 48 Hours correspondent Richard Schelsinger confronted John Fillette outside of his home in Arizona about the allegations surrounding him, in which he denied killing Irene Garza. However, in February of 2016, Fillette was arrested in Scottsdale, Arizona. He was 83 at the time of his arrest, and he used a walker when he appeared in court. He was extradited to Texas in March of 2016 and incarcerated at the Hidalgo County Sheriff's Adult Detention Facility. He entered a plea of not guilty, and the prosecution requested a $750,000 bond, while the defense team asked for $100,000, claiming that Fillette had stage 3 kidney and bladder cancer. Judge Louise Singletary said a $1 million bond.
Well, he ain't going to be running real fast anyway with that walker.
Status hearings in the case were held in June and November 2016, and the discovery process was ongoing as of November. In February of 2017, a judge set a late April date, and Fillette remained under medical supervision at the Hidalgo County Jail. In April of 2017, Fillette's defense filed for a change of venue because they believed their client would not receive a fair and impartial trial in Hidalgo County. They filed a 700-page document with evidence showing that reporters allegedly condemned Fillette as a murderer, and that the only reason why he avoided prosecution for years was because of the Roman Catholic Church protected him. Sometime in March, Tachny testified against Fillette in closed deposition, and this was permitted under Texas law given the witness's age and exclusive knowledge of the case. On May 24th, Judge Singletary heard arguments from the prosecution and defense on the request for the change of venue. On June 7th, he denied the request for change of venue after considering that the defendant failed to prove there was prejudice against him in the Hidalgo community. The trial was expected to begin on September 11th. However, on September 10th, the court decided to push back the trial because of scheduling conflicts. One of Fiat's attorneys was defending another high-profile murder case in Hidalgo County. So Fiat appeared in court on September 11th for the first time without a prison uniform, expecting to face trial that week. The jury selection was done in September, and the trial was delayed until October. On October 30th, Fiat's defense filed a motion for continuance, and the jury selection was reset to November 14th, and November 6th trial date was moved back to November 28th. And then on December 7th, Fiat was convicted of Garza's murder. During the trial, prosecutor Mike Garza, also not a relation, he said, quote, there may be a lot
of Garzas down there.
I know. Yes, there are. He said, quote, there may be people who don't understand why an old man is being prosecuted, but make no mistake. This is an evil man. He was a predator. He was a wolf in priest clothing looking to attack. In the punishment phase of the trial, Fiat's defense attorney asked that Fiat be given probation, citing his lack of felony convictions since Irene's death. The prosecution asked for a sentence of 57 years, which was a symbolic of the amount of time that had passed since Irene's death. But on September 8, 2017, the jury pronounced a sentence of life in prison.
Well, he ain't going to make 57 years anyway.
No.
83, 84 at this point?
Yeah. Well, he was incarcerated at the W.J. Estelle unit, which is 10 miles north of Huntsville. He died of natural causes on February 12, 2020, as he was in the process of appealing his life sentence.
That's the old folks' home prison.
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's the story of the murder of Irene Garza.
Well, thank you, sir.
I think that highlights two. So, yeah, I said before, right? Justice is complicated.
Yep.
But two big issues that also affect any kind of wrongdoing by police officers, self-investigation. You know, it's like, who the hell gets to investigate their own people for wrongdoing?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, for a criminal thing. It's just crazy. And second, I know that he didn't have this legally, but qualified immunity. You know, because there's so much of the church, especially Roman Catholic, because they're big, they're powerful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying, okay, so we're not going to be transparent about this, and because this person has a high standing in the church, that we can't let them go to prison or be tried or whatever. And you see it because the Church of Scientology tries to do that, or does that. Mm-hmm. And the I don't want to say the Mormons because that's not really accurate. The ones with the communes where one guy runs it and can marry whoever he wants to at any age.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there are Mormons like that. I don't think there are that many in the United States. I think they're mostly in Central America now because it's not necessarily legal here anymore.
Right. Well, there's at least one of those compound communes or whatever
in the States.
Yeah.
Oh well.
It's just for whatever reason, it's real hard for law enforcement to go in there and say, "You married a 12-year-old, you're going to jail."
Yeah.
Right.
It's illegal in this state.
Yeah, in this country. I don't care about the terms of the marriage. You had relations with someone who is legally not able to give consent. Mm-hmm. So
you're going to jail.
I'm going to take this big book of laws and morals and ethics and beat you preferably to death with it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still illegal in the state of Texas to kill somebody. I'm sorry. I didn't have the money. Yeah, take your moral authority and shove it down your wazoo. The Catholic Church has a lot of money and a lot of power, but presumably they've been doing this for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what they've done, what they did besides that, they've been doing this for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think they need to just come right out and admit it all. I mean, that's what I like about this new pope. I think he's more apt to do it than any of his predecessors.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen.
You don't think so?
No. Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen any more than I think there'll be an overhaul of police departments in general to enforce transparency and impartial review of accusations. I mean, you can't even get them all to wear body cameras.
No.
No. And apparently, for some reason, even in places where you're required to wear the body camera, there's the option to just
if you turn it off, it's tampering with evidence. So I don't care who you are. If you turn the body camera off, it's tampering with evidence because it's evidence of a crime.
But they investigate themselves.
Yeah.
No.
It's
like, oh, well, he didn't turn it off. He bumped it. Well, he bumped it at an awfully suspicious time.
Mm-hmm. What about the other 3 cops that were around him? Why were their body cams off?
Right. They all chest bumped together, and unfortunately, it turned off all their body cams. I don't know. I don't know how they get away. Police, churches, even to some extent schools, with all of this obstruction and miscarriage of justice that happens.
It's the good old boy network. They protect each other.
But it goes, I think it goes, unfortunately, further than that and deeper than that, because some of it is, like Jeff said during this thing, people didn't want to talk about the possibility that it might be a priest.
Well, and the church was also telling them, you can't think this way. A priest is above this.
Right. Well, but people are willing to let themselves be told not to think this way, and it's the whole hand wave. It's like, well, no. This is a man of the cloth, or this is a man with a badge, or, this is a well-respected teacher, whatever, there's no way they could have done this. Willful ignorance is also a problem.
Yes.
You've got to be willing. If this is what the facts say, then you have to accept them, whether it makes you uncomfortable or not.
Right. Well, lots of strong opinions on this one. I found it to be a fascinating story, especially because it happened around here. So,
thanks for the story, man. That was great.
Just up the road by about 40 minutes. So,
yeah, it's weird to hear you say around here, because you say around here, and I think Denton.
No, not no more.
No, he's eight hours away, man.
More like about 9.5, almost 10. So, all right. Well, I appreciate y'all for joining us. I appreciate our listeners for staying with us. I know we've had several long episodes here recently, but hopefully you've enjoyed the information we've given here. You can always find more about us on our website, nerderyandmurdery.com. That's our hub, where you can find the links to what we talked about. I'm starting to lose my voice. Links to what we talked about, plus pictures of things we've discussed, and you can also find the link to our YouTube page, which Zig so often updates. Yes.
We've got links. There'll be several things in this episode. Matter of fact, that's one of the things I was noting out. Oh, I need to add this. I need to add this. So when you go to that the YouTube page, you'll be able to see all the stuff we're talking about. So you can kind of look at it and see for yourself.
Awesome. Appreciate that. On our webpage, you can also find the link to our merchandise, where if you wish to show off your Nerdery and Murdery fandom, please do consider purchasing something from our shop. That, along with our patrons, you can find the link to our Patreon page, where if you wish to become a patron and donate to our show, it does help keep us on the air, because there are costs that are associated with the show. It helps each and every one of us. Please and thank you. Sorry. He forgot where he was.
I was goofing off with the pointing at Don.
last but not least, please don't forget to leave a 5-star review wherever you can. It really helps us and helps others find our content that may be looking for the information that we're discussing. So, Don, thank you again for joining us. We appreciate you sticking around with us and helping us out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thanks again. With that,
I have been Zig with your nerdery.
and I'm Geoffrey with your murdering.
Cue the music.